Hello, you're listening to the Saluki Gamescast, the single greatest video game podcast in the communication studies wing of the communication building at Southern Illinois University. I don't think anybody can argue that, really.
So true.
Yeah.
We absolutely win that battle. This is episode 53 for September 8th, 2023. My name is Justin Young. Joining me, as usual, is Alicia Utecht, Mario Sanders, and OJ Duncan. How's everyone?
You know,
Good.
It was a weird pause. Thinking, not okay.
Yeah.
it's a bit of a week. I'm not going to lie.
It's not that time of the semester already,
It's
Alicia.
not that time of the semester, but it is a bit of a week.
Yeah.
But
I was talking about that with other people. I think because it was a short week, we had Monday off for, was it Labor Day, right? Yeah. I feel like you don't properly like hype yourself up for the start of the week when there's a short week. You know, like Sunday night, you sort of like, okay, it's the start of the week. You don't do that when the week starts on Tuesday. And so it just makes the week feel that much more exhausting.
that actually makes me feel better about this week, because this week it's just been like, so my head is not in the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not going to disagree with you, but I do like the idea that Mario's idea of getting hyped is, all right, first of the week.
You don't drop one of those on Sunday night?
I am jazzed now. I am ready for this new week.
You know, like the mental energy that goes into, okay, well, tomorrow's Monday.
No, I mean, I'm impressed. Like, it takes very little for you to get jazzed for the new week.
Normally
Most people need like a real hype machine, but like you're like, no, let's not overdo it.
Normally on Sunday, I'm just giving like the Norman ugh type thing. So I might have to try that. Just, hey, let's go this week.
I mean, you
Let's
already seem more hyped.
go.
Yeah, I do. I feel more hyped. My brain fog cleared.
This is the beginning of Mario's cult.
It'll be really easy. It'll be even easier moving forward because like the end of the weekend will be marked by just spending all day Sunday watching football at this point. So
Okay, you said that in response to my cult comment. You said it'll be even easier going forward. Now that I have conquered the internet via podcast, all my cult plans are coming together.
I don't know if I can take ownership of the NFL as a cult, but you know.
I mean, it qualifies for some people.
Oh my gosh.
Anybody do anything interesting in we had Labor Day weekend. Obviously, that's why this is an abbreviated week. Anybody have any exciting escapades?
I didn't last weekend. I do this weekend, because tomorrow night we have the graduate student performance spotlight hour.
Yeah, so what are you doing with that?
I'm actually doing a collab with another person in our program, Zoe, and we are having some fun with... Are y'all familiar with the story My Immortal?
Oh no.
Oh, only via you, Alicia.
We're having some fun with it.
Oh no.
This is
I wish y'all could see OJ's face right now.
this is like the Draco fan fiction.
It's... Hi, my name is Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way, and I have long black ebony hair that reaches my mid-back. That's how I got my name, with red tips and icy blue eyes that look like limpid tears, and a lot of people tell me I look like Amy Lee. Author's note, if you don't know who that is, get the hell out of here.
Okay. I understand it's terrible and everything, but is it the Harry Potter fan fiction?
It is... Sure.
It began as that?
It's supposedly set at Hogwarts. It supposedly has Harry Potter characters, but we can't keep any of them with their actual names except for Draco. Harry is renamed Vampire. Ron is renamed Diablo. Hermione is B'' Luddy, so Bloody Mary.
These all sound like improvements.
Now, are you changing these names, or are they changed in My Immortal?
These are the names that Tara Gillespie, the author of My Immortal, changed all of their names in the story.
Because she was hoping to go the Twilight route.
Oh, this was pre-Twilight.
Or not Twilight, the 50 Shades of
This
Gray.
was before all that.
Yeah.
This was 2005, 2006.
Okay.
This inspired the person who did 50 Shades of Grey. Not really.
Look, there's not a lot of things that I can say.
That's so much darker than anything else you've done.
I mean, look, we do have some iconic lines from My Immortal that I'm not sure if I can say on this podcast because they're
You should read it once if you are on the internet.
yeah. Yeah, you have to experience My Immortal, and you have to experience the original story, because there's a lot of people who've done like web series and adaptations of it, but they always do it where everyone around Ebony is cringing at her, and it's like, no, everyone is in love with Ebony. Everyone wants to be Ebony or Enobi, depending on what sentence you're in at the moment.
Well, it sounds like we'll get that experience.
I think
tomorrow.
so. I hope so.
Oh, that should be fun.
It'll be great. I haven't finished the script yet. It'll be great.
That's reassuring. It's tomorrow night.
Yeah,
That goes with the story, though. So,
it kind of does.
yeah.
I mean, this is real guerrilla theater.
Yeah.
I like it.
I originally I had stuff going on tomorrow night, but I might have to shift that a little bit.
Please do. It's gonna be fun. And like you all know Zoe. You know how fabulous she is and how much she enjoys really getting into character and having fun with that.
Is she
So,
Ebony or are you Ebony?
we're kind of trading off.
Okay.
So there's parts where I do Ebony and Tara. There's parts where I think she will.
Okay.
And like there's also interwoven, kind of our own experiences with stories like this and writing not as bad, but our own experiences.
Says you.
Oh, I look, I can honestly say I've heard a 10-minute cutting of 50 Shades of Grey, and that is better written than My Immortal. With all my love to Tara Gillespie and My Immortal, because that is at least so bad it's good.
Yeah, I wrote fanfic about Jason David Frank when I was in high school in 1997 in a creative writing class my sophomore year, and that was better than My Immortal.
That's awesome.
The Green Ranger.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure everyone in this university writes better than Tara Gillespie. And I've read some bad undergrad papers.
That's such a weird legacy to have. Because like when you think about like fan fiction, most fan fiction, like maybe you can tell me differently, but like most fan fiction is instantly forgotten. Like the moment it's put online, like people very few people read it or like are going to remember it. And this person writes this piece that years later graduate students are performing.
Well, I think a lot of the long-lasting fics, unfortunately, tend to be the ones that have real-life drama tied to them. One of the things that I think helps My Immortal last is that we really cannot be certain why. Was she genuine and like really trying to write something good? Was she trolling? Who even the heck is Tara? Like, I have done enough digging into this to have a fairly solid opinion for myself on all of these things, but the fact that we've had so long of not knowing, not ever being sure, and when we think we find out who Tara is, it eventually gets unraveled. And when we think that we find out, and the two biggest times that someone's claimed and been taken seriously and gotten some serious looking into it, both of those people claimed that it was a troll fic, so that they were just making fun of all the Mary Sues and goths and bad writing on fanfiction.net. But
So basically she's the digital DB Cooper.
yeah, exactly.
All right.
In my heart, I choose to believe that it was a sincere attempt at writing good fan fiction. I don't care what anyone else says.
It's so hard to tell online. Like, it's so hard to tell. Are people being serious? Like, I remember a few years ago when the the flat Earth thing really started kind of blowing up in popularity, and you're like, the first time you see that in a tweet, you're like, ha ha ha, and then the second and third and fifth time, you're like, oh no.
Yeah. I want to believe. I want to believe that it's genuine, and there's some things that I think that says about me, but well,
You're
I'll get into that tomorrow
optimist.
night. I'll get into that tomorrow night.
Well, let's see. I have nothing that exciting. I did go to the DuQuoin State Fair last weekend, which is like super dramatic in the way that it presents itself. Why are you booing the state fair?
Look, I'm from Minnesota. The only state fairs that are actually state fairs are Minnesota and Texas. Every other one is just a dinky little county fair.
The DuQuoin State Fair is pretty big. Like compared to all of them in the country, it's pretty big, honestly.
I mean, maybe it's mid-tier, but like...
No. I mean, like, it
be.
is actually pretty big compared to all of them.
No.
It's one of the biggest ones in the country, yes.
No.
It is. It is.
It might... I mean,
Have
it
you-
could be one of the
have you
biggest
been?
ones. Yeah, I went last year. It could be one of the biggest ones in the country, but that doesn't boot it above mid-tier. Because most of them are bottom tier.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair.
All right. So, anyways, Minnesota, we have a big mall and a big fair.
Minnesota.
Oh, yeah. The Minnesota, great state get together,
Yeah, but like you don't even have the butter carving like Wisconsin, right?
That's because Wisconsin has nothing else.
Well, I don't
There's
know.
cheese.
Yeah, cheese. Like,
There's a castle of cheese right when you go into Wisconsin.
Oh my
what's
God.
better than cheese? Like, seriously. What can any fair offer me that's better than cheese?
Have you ever seen the list of foods at the Minnesota State Fair every year?
Do they involve cheese?
So much cheese, so much
So
fried
they're-
food, so
they're
much everything.
So they're copying.
Wisconsin wishes
Wisconsin.
it could be as good as Minnesota.
All right. So, anyways, the DuQuoin State Fair. I went to that this weekend, and if so this is basically your county fair on steroids, and it's they have rides, they have games, they have lots of terrible junk food, and then one of the weird things that they do have that you don't see at your normal county fair is they have large sections roped off to like sell you RVs and four-wheelers and like all this stuff that you're sort of like, who's going to the state fair to buy this? So they had like a Mercedes conversion van for like $160,000 that somebody was showing there.
Huh.
And I'm just thinking like, okay, like first who's spending $160,000 on a conversion van? Seems like a lot of money. You could buy like a full-size RV for that money. And why does it need to be a Mercedes? That seemed like a really weird setup and premise, but you get
Look,
to
Mercedes doesn't have enough of a claim to fame.
that's true.
So there is a church in town that was in the same like a little area as Rainbow Cafe that had a Mercedes conversion van.
Oh, wow. La-di-da.
That's who needs a Mercedes conversion van is the church in Carbondale.
Like maybe there's something I just don't understand about it. There's some good logical reason. It seems like there are cheaper ways to do that, and you could take
Agreed.
that money and feed the hungry.
Yeah,
maybe.
Oh, I
All sorts of
100% agree.
But anyway, so you go to that. There's other fun stuff like you see mullets in the wild that like. And my thing with the mullet is, why is anyone still rocking the mullet this much longer? Like everybody universally agrees they look horrible.
They listen to too much Billy Ray Cyrus.
Well, I understand the person who accidentally has the mullet, right? Like, we've all seen the person, and sometimes women fall into this where like they just need a haircut. They haven't had one lately, and you start looking, and you go, "Oh no!"
That's why everyone, when the pandemic started, was like, "I need to get a haircut."
Right? Yeah, it absolutely is.
Well, so just here's the thing with mullets that you and I especially have to deal with is that right when we were coming of age, where we're remembering stuff, mullets were out. And the only people who had them were old, creepy people. And the same with mustaches, really. Is like, so as we were starting to remember, mullets were already old. So as they're coming back...
Mustache equal pervert.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It still does. Don't get me wrong.
Right. But now, as the new younger people are coming up, they never experienced that. So they do actually think that it's attractive. Whereas we had a universal disdain by the time we grew up because we were past the mullet.
OJ, the children are wrong.
I know. I agree with you 100%. I had to think about this for a while. When I went to a drag show and I saw like 7 people with mullets, and I was like, what the hell is happening in the United States right now?
It's
like,
not just the U.S., too.
Yeah, and I'm like...
years ago, there were multiple
Should we be overthrown? Should somebody come in? Because, like, the mullets are back, and they're everywhere. And mullets and mustaches, and I'm just like,
I feel like if anybody should know better, drag queens should know better.
Right, and they don't. I know a couple of drag queens with a mullet. I know a bunch of people at a drag show with a mullet, and they're like, oh, you look great. And I'm like, no. What is wrong with you? What? Southern Illinois should just be canceled because... And then I look, and they're everywhere. They're all over TikTok. I see a bunch of, like, really attractive people wearing mullets and a mustache, and I'm like, why?
It's the Joe Dirt influence, I think.
It really is. You know, it's actually Stranger Things. It was Stranger Things.
Joe Dirt is free on YouTube right now, so you never know.
Yeah.
I think Stranger Things.
Yeah.
It was like the big 80s nostalgia poll, I think, was just all...
Yeah.
Not all Stranger Things, but prominently Stranger Things.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And they're not bringing back the crop tops that I would love to see guys wearing. No, they bring back mullets and mustaches. And, like... Sorry. That's... I didn't mean to take over your county fair story with my disdain.
It's okay. I can't tell this county fair story between you and Alicia.
I'm listening, Justin.
Only until you can jump in.
I love that you just acknowledged that it's only a county fair.
Anyways, the last thing that we did was we went to the car races that they have there, which are like quite enjoyable. And I would suggest if you go to the DuQuoin State Fair, and I do talk to people sometimes who do and don't go to see any of the car races or anything. Like, well, why are you going? Like, it's a once a year activity to see. It's pretty cool, and the seats are cheap, and you have a great view of it. So, not to call anyone out by name, but if they happen to be my grad assistant, I might call them out by name. So anyways, let's move on to what we've been playing. Alicia, what have you been playing?
So still playing Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Man, the completionist in me wants to collect all the spirits, but I'm starting to get tired. And I'm starting to get to the point of like, okay, I refresh the spirit board and it's still just the same spirits that I already have. And I'm like, come on. Can we just give me something new, please? And it's not even like the game gives you a reward for getting them all, so I might it might be time to let that fade.
That's where I fell off. It just became a chore. It stopped being fun like it originally did, and you know, I still play the game obviously now and then, especially when people are over or something. But like the first person, the single player mode of collecting those spirits, it doesn't have the right end game to it.
Yeah.
It becomes too much of a chore.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, I've got all of the Castlevania ones, I've got all the Sonic ones, I've got a vast majority of the Pokemon ones, I've got all the Earthbound ones. So like I'm really at a point where I'm like, oh, do I have all the ones for this series rather than do I have all the spirits? Because I'm like, I want, you know, all the Earthbound ones because I fell in love with Earthbound this year.
Right.
But yeah.
And that should be easy to do. Like, maybe not easy, like the actual accomplishing of it, but like figuring out how to do it. You should be able to go, okay, I want to collect all the Earthbound ones. I go to this area and they're all located here, and here's the missions I need to do.
Yeah.
And it's not always that clear in that game.
No, and it's like, okay, you do the adventure, you can do the World of Light storyline, but then you have to get some of them from the Spirit Board, but then you have to summon other ones. But and the Spirit Board does not indicate well if you've gotten a spirit before. Like, it'll say in the top left corner that it's clear if you've beaten that spirit before, but it could be that you beat that spirit and after you beat them, it has a little shield spinner that you have to shoot the character through in order to actually get the spirit. So like, it doesn't tell you if you actually got them from that, or like, I'll have ones that I'm like, I know I got this, and sometimes it'll have a little check mark on the box, and sometimes it won't, and I'm just like, I'm so sick of having to go back to my inventory and check every single time with some of these ones that I'm like, I know I've seen this here. Do I have it currently? Did I get it before and dismiss it? I don't know.
Right.
So, kind of getting burnt out on that. It's still probably something that I'll play, when I'm watching a movie or whatever and just hanging out, but kind of getting burnt out on that single player. But the other thing I've been playing, and I haven't played a lot because it literally released yesterday and the download took forever, but Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis is finally here.
Okay. I didn't know.
Yep. I had it pre-installed, and so it popped up on my phone on Wednesday, and I was like, I have time. I can play it. And then it's like, LOL, releases tomorrow. I'm like, I hate you, phone. Like I said, I haven't played a ton of it so far, but it's...
Is this the phone game?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the phone game that is going to have everything. The original Final Fantasy VII, Crisis Core, First Soldier, Advent Children, which is a movie and has never been a game before Crisis, which was a mobile game in Japan only. And, like, there's fan translations that have been on YouTube for 12 years, so, like, I know the whole game, but like, those are the things that I'm excited for with this, is Before Crisis, Advent Children. I am excited to get to the First Soldier stuff, because they added backstory for Sephiroth that obviously I really want to have, because Sephiroth is incredible. But the way it's set up, it makes right now, and maybe it'll unlock more once I get through these three, but right now the only things that I can see it has are the original game, Crisis Core, and First Soldier. And I don't think it has the full of any of these.
Okay.
But, like, you have to get through so much of the original game before you can play any of Crisis Core, and then you have to get through so much of Crisis Core before you can play any of First Soldier. And I'm like, man, if I want to play the original game, I have the PS1 game. And
So
it's not even really... It's like mini cutscenes mostly.
Yeah, so when you say it has the original game in it, like, it's not the actual original game. This is like retelling the story of the original game?
It's like a very abridged version. Like, it is using the original game script in terms of... you get the flower from Aerith, and you can choose if you want to give it to Tifa or Marlene.
But it's not the actual game.
It's very abridged mini chapters of it. So, like...
Is it like when Kingdom Hearts did those cutscene movies on, like, the big packs of games that they released?
Kinda?
Kingdom Heart 2.5.
I think that was 2.8.
Ever After, Forever prequel.
Yeah.
The sequel.
Dream drop distance.
Yeah. So, like, it has some of them, like, blowing up Mako Reactor 8-1, which is the first one you blow up.
I couldn't tell you.
I think it's 8.
Yeah.
It's been, 25 years since I played that game.
So, like, blowing up Mako Reactor 8, it does have you actually control Cloud, going through the Mako Reactor and setting the bomb and doing a couple of fights. But then, like, it doesn't have you control getting out before it blows up.
Right.
And, like, it doesn't have you on the train from Sector 8 to get back to 7th Heaven.
And the fights you're controlling, are you doing this through like a turn-based role-playing game format? How's that working? How are the fights?
It's closer to that than, like, say, Remake is. But, yeah, it fills up your ATB gauge for you to do special attacks. So, magic and limit breaks and all that. And then it'll just auto-attack for, just running forward and slashing with the Buster Sword.
Okay.
But I don't know. I'm not loving the gameplay, but also, it's the original. It's Final Fantasy VII. I'm very used to that being a different gameplay. So I'm hoping that once I get to something that I'm not used to another gameplay, like once I get to First Soldier, that was designed to be a mobile game, and once I get to Before Crisis, that was designed to be a mobile game, that it'll get better. But right now, I'm just like, man, I have to slog through, and I know I'm gonna have to slog through Crisis Core parts. Yeah. But also I'm a little intrigued because like it does, when you first open up the game, it starts off with Cloud versus Sephiroth, and you fully powered up, you've got Blizzaga and Firaga and all that, and then Cloud has one of his moments where like he collapses and is holding his head, and then Zack jumps in and does that and does a little bit of the fight before it cuts you away. And then, like, when you're doing the first mission to blow up Mako Reactor 1 or 8, whichever one it is now, when you're doing that mission, that has always had a moment where Cloud has kind of a head moment. And I can't remember. I have to go back and look, but I think that the dialogue there is slightly different. Where I think that the voice, the unidentified voice, because the unidentified voice here says, "What are you doing? Can't you tell this isn't a normal Mako reactor?" Which I don't think it said in the original. I think in the original it just was like Cloud, trying to get through to him. So I have to go check that, but that might be something interesting where they're playing with timelines and universes in the same way that Remake has been. So
the same way that they have been with all their games recently, all the Final Fantasy games, because that's what Final Fantasy Origin was doing, right? It's playing with the timelines and sort of retelling the story in a different perspective.
Yeah.
And also Stranger in Paradise was doing the same thing kind of a little bit.
Yeah.
Trying to.
Yeah. Allegedly.
No, I think that's really, I think it's kind of interesting, right? Like they're doing something more interesting than a straightforward remake.
Yeah.
With these, and I think that's, that was one of the really cool things about Remake was, okay, well, we're going to retell this story, but we're going to play with it and not just do a straightforward remake, which I understand why that annoys some people, but I think it's kind of fun and interesting.
Well, in 7, it makes sense. It makes sense. The prevailing theory around Remake is, the original Final Fantasy VII starts and ends with Aerith looking into the life stream. And so kind of the prevailing theory I've heard around Remake is that the fact that the original starts and ends that way, the argument is that the original is entirely Aerith's vision of what has to happen. And so then Remake is following through on, that moment in the end of the game where she's looking into the live stream. That's when she's coming back from that vision and being like, okay, now I have to go do this.
Oh, so she's Doctor Strange.
A little bit.
So one outcome.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. That sounds interesting. I'm interested to know what you think after you've put some more time into that, because
there's definitely potential. It's just the gameplay right now for games that I already know how to play a different way are annoying me.
Well, and I never played those spinoffs, so I'm more interested in those than going back and replaying 7 again.
Yeah.
All right. Is that everything?
Yeah, that's it. Like I said, bit of a week.
Yeah. No.
I shouldn't have even really taken the time to play Ever Crisis, but I was like, I need to talk about this.
All right, Mario, what have you been playing?
Yeah, so I played a few different things this past week. I thought it was funny that, or just coincidence that last week we talked about the pro sports and like the licensing of characters and stuff, and our N64 Mania group ended up playing those Ken Griffey Jr. baseball games last Friday.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we played both of those. The first one, Major League Baseball featuring Ken Griffey Jr., was pretty good. I was not as much of a fan of Slugfest, which was the second one.
I think that's the general consensus usually.
The batting was just impossible, which I guess is like accurate to real baseball. But
Yeah, but nobody wants that, really. Like, the best baseball games let you hit the ball.
Pitching was easy and batting was impossible. And so, I mean, but it was fun to play them. You know, of baseball games, I feel like those ones have like not necessarily stood the test of time, but I feel like they're ones that get referenced a lot. So did those. I don't really have much more to say beyond that. The game I probably spent the most time playing was Zero Time Dilemma, which is the third game in the Zero Escape trilogy. Zero Escape is so I know Ryan talked a lot about the Somnium Files. The Zero Escape is the series that creator made before the Somnium Files. And the first two games, 999 and VLR, are two of my favorites, like, of all time. I would consider putting both of those in like my top 5 favorite games. And so I'm finally getting around to the third one, and it's okay. It's one that I think a lot of people feel like there's a pretty sizable drop off from the first two to this one, and I can understand why.
Is the creator involved in this third one, or did he leave to go work on the AI series?
He is. He was involved in the third one, but from what I understand, there was like a pretty sizable gap in release, because the first two came out and they were, from what I understand, failures in Japan. Like, sales-wise, they didn't do very well, and they sort of got a cult following, which made them bring him back for a third game. And so I don't know if there wasn't there, or it's the story is starting to get a little overly convoluted. The motivation, and maybe it's just like the motivations behind the like bad guy they're very connected to what happens in the second game, or at least they're supposed to be, but it just hasn't really revealed that. And I guess I would think like, we know why certain people are here participating in this game, but they haven't gotten around to that. The way that I don't think it's the best description, but it's the one that I think is in many ways the most accurate, is they're also a visual novel. And it's like if they turned the Saw movies into like a visual novel, where you have like this sort of murder game where these people are being held and they have to play these games. Basically, it's a bunch of escape rooms for like their life.
So it's like the movie Escape Room.
I've never seen that movie, but sure. Yeah, I guess so. I don't think Saw is necessarily like a great comparison because it's not like that grotesque. You know, the whole purpose, like the purpose of like the initial game that gets played is for everybody to survive, but through their unwillingness to participate with one another, they don't. And so, like I said, they're very good. If people are interested, I know I've talked about them with Ryan. I don't think Ryan has played them, but the first two games you can get as like a package on Steam called Zero Escape the Nonary games. I would highly recommend those two to basically anybody. They were originally on the DS, and I don't know what the third one was on. The third one might have been a PSP or PC game. I don't know. I don't think it was a DS game, though, because this one has like full motion animation in like the cutscenes and stuff like that. But yeah, it's okay compared to the first two. But the first two, like I said, I would consider putting both of those in like my top 5. VLR would be like the one outside, but top 6, if not top 5.
Right.
No, both of those two are very high on like my favorite games list. So it's nice to finally get around to this third one.
Yeah, I mean, when you mention those names, they like sound familiar, but I know nothing about those games.
Yeah, so 999, I always get the order mixed up, but it's like 9 persons, 9 hours, 9 doors. Or it's those 3 things in some order.
Sure.
I don't know what the proper one is. And then VLR is Virtue's Last Reward. And yeah, they're fun. They're a little like pretentious and pseudoscience-y because that's like what the purpose of the game is, in terms of like these experiments that this organization are running. But yeah,
a pretentious visual novel, you said.
it's just like it'll drop like okay. So for example, and I was really mad. I was really salty when I was playing it. Are y'all familiar with the Monty Hall problem?
Sounds vaguely familiar.
Okay. So it's, for people who are listening who might not be familiar, it's the famous Let's Make a Deal game show where there are 3 doors and there's a good thing behind one door and there's a bad thing behind 2 doors. And you make your choice and the host opens up one of the doors and says, okay, you now have these 2 options. Do you want to stay where you are or do you want to swap? Mathematically, statistically, your best odds are to swap. And so in this game, it presents this with you. Rather than having 3 doors, it's 10 doors. You pick one. They open up 8 of the doors. So you're down to just the 2. So you should have a 90% odds with swapping. So I swap. I play the game as it wants me to play it, and it's still like, nah, you're going to lose anyways. And I was just like, game, don't like make a big deal about, like, that's literally what the name of the like section of the game is Monty Hall, and they reference it in the cutscene. And like the first guy is like, whoa, that's great. Now it's down to 50-50. And the girl is like, no, you don't know. And then she passes out before, actually like revealing like the true statistics behind it. And I'm like, I know what this is, and you're still like owning me. And it was just randomness. I just lost a 10% roll because when I went back in to do it again, I swapped again because, again, that's statistically the right thing to do. And it was right the second time. So it's just like game making a big old deal about this and then owning me anyways. Yeah.
Monty Hall been screwing over people for decades.
It goes from Monty Hall to Murphy's Law.
But yeah, so like I said, those first 2, I think you could play the first one. You could play 999 and never play any of the other 2. It's like a pretty solid self-contained story. The second one builds on it, and the second one ends like leading into, okay, there's clearly going to be this third one.
So it's the Star Wars franchise.
Sure. I'm not super familiar with Star Wars. Yeah, I will never, I'm not a Star Wars. I don't know which one. I don't think I've ever seen the 6th Star Wars or like episode 6. I've seen all the other ones, but yeah. Anyways, so don't ask me to pretend to know about Star Wars. Everybody's really quiet, and I feel like I just have to talk, but I'm only continuing to dig myself a further hole.
I don't know. Alicia's over there typing something on her phone. I don't want to know what it is.
I'm finding out way too many people in my life who have never seen Star Wars this year. When are you coming over?
Anyways, the first 2 games are very good. I recommend people play them.
Yeah, I feel like the young people have been let down. The kids, OJ, the kids, they're not all right. They're mullets, not watching Star Wars.
Well, I forget who I told that to, and they were like flabbergasted that, like, so you've seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 9. We're like, yeah. Like, okay. But anyways, the other thing, I haven't played really much of it at all, so I can't talk about it, but I think somebody else will later, is I started Starfield. I figured I just wanted to give it a try. I know pretty confidently that it's not really the game for me, just because that's not the style of game I play a lot of. I'm sure it's phenomenal. From what I did play, it seems very well made, and it seems like it's really good, but it's just not really my type of game.
All right. OJ, what have you been playing?
Okay, so on our last episode, we talked about Sea of Stars was going to be coming out. And so last Saturday, I started playing it. And it is amazing. It's what I've been wanting a game to come out for so long. That was more along like JRPG type stuff. And it's not 32-bit, but it looks kind of like sometimes. That's the style of it. And then the style changes a little bit because there's like not full motion video, but there's like cutscenes where things happen, and it's a much different art style. But the game is like a love letter to old JRPGs, and it's so amazing. Like it's serving Chrono Trigger, it is serving Super Mario RPG. There's Secret of Mana. There's a little bit of Earthbound in it, and so it includes really good stuff from a lot of old JRPGs all put together into one. Like from Super Mario RPG, I always really appreciated the like if you hit it at a special time, or if you hit the button when they're about to hit you, you can dodge and stuff like that. So that's a big part of this game. And there's like combos between group members that you can do, which was really one of my favorite parts of Chrono Trigger. And you're always running, so you don't have to hold a button to run, which I always hated in games. But you're always running. It's a good speed. And when you're like jumping up and climbing or swimming, you stay at that speed. It's not like it slows you down, which is like the best thing from any game pretty much I've ever experienced. And I know a lot of people are talking about it like, oh, it has these old graphics. It's not very good, but it's really built upon the graphics. So it still looks like a game from the late 90s, but it's like elevated. And one of the most amazing things that I thought so far is that there's like a level, and it's Song Shroom Forest or Shroom Song Forest or something like that. And so like it looks very much like an old JRPG game, but the backgrounds are all moving a little more than they would in the other games. Like there might always be a flame or something that happened in the old ones, but like the full background is moving most of the time. And there's light changing and stuff. And when you go into this forest, there are gigantic mushrooms. And like when you first walk in, there's like 2 holes and a little line underneath. And it's like, oh, that kind of looks like a face. But then as the music in the background starts changing, the mushrooms wake up and start singing. And they're like chanting and doing like a little like song in the background, and it's matching. And it's just like, that blew me away. I just had to sit there and watch it for a little bit. I was just like, this is so amazing. And it's in a background of this game. And it's hard to talk about without any spoilers, but, again, it's a huge love letter to old JRPG. I really suggest if you like any JRPG at all, you play it. And they're just bringing so much stuff. And I want to talk more about it, but it would spoil a lot of the stuff.
It looks like it's what a lot of these sort of like pixel throwback games do nowadays, where they are certainly evoking the feeling, the memory of particularly 16-bit RPGs in this case, but it looks much better than those games could have looked at that time, right?
Yeah.
So I think you're right when you say it's much closer to a 32-bit RPG in like the performance and things it's doing.
Yeah.
And this is PlayStation, Steam?
Yeah, so it's for free on Game Pass and PlayStation Plus, I know. But you can also get it on the Switch. You can get it on Steam, I think.
Yes,
I think it's on everything.
Yeah, it's on everything.
Okay.
It's worth it. I was playing it for free on PlayStation Plus, and then I went and bought it just to support them because it's so good. I could talk the entire podcast about just how amazing the game was, and just like,
How much was it, if you don't mind me asking?
was it 20?
remember?
I didn't actually look at the price. I just went and bought it.
Oh, to be able to do that.
I don't think it's full price, so I think it is somewhere in that like 20 to 30 range.
That's
Yeah.
what I figured.
Yeah, I think it is like for the initial like release or something like that. And but no, so my birthday was also last weekend, so I had some money in my account from my birthday, and that's why I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna go buy it. But it's really worth it if you like any type of old JRPG. If you like Final Fantasy VI, if you like Chrono Trigger, if you like Secret of Mana, if you like Super Mario RPG, if you liked Earthbound. There's not a lot of Earthbound in it, but there's a little bit in it. And right at the very beginning, and this is like right when you start off, so I'm not spoiling anything, but there's a piece of equipment that has a reference to Kids in the Hall. So if you've ever seen Kids in the Hall, they have a segment, and it's like, oh no, what is it?
Is it Chicken Lady?
No.
Oh.
It's 30 Sharons agree or 30 Susans agree. I can't remember which one it is. But they have like 30 women with the same name, and it's like 30 Susans agree. This is the best pot pie, or 30 Susans, something. And so one of the descriptions on the armor that you start with is 30 adventurers agree. This is the best possible.
That's great.
Yeah. But the story is good. It's darker than a lot of the old JRPGs, which is a high bar, kind of, if you really think about a lot of them.
Final Fantasy VI, the world came to an end.
Yeah, like Like everybody's life was destroyed.
And a lot of those games are about killing God.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, the storyline, and again, this isn't a spoiler because it comes out right at the beginning, but there's these horrible creatures called dwellers that were made by someone called the Fleshmancer. And the dwellers are just like, it's like the dweller of doom or gloom, the dweller of darkness, stuff like that, like horrible names. And then so if they get strong enough, they become a world eater and destroy the world. And there's different worlds that the Fleshmancer has gone to, and some of them are destroyed, and some of them they're solstice warriors, which is what you are. And the solstice warriors can beat them and then kind of ascend to gods and save that world, right? And so you're starting in one of the worlds, and it was just you're doing stuff like that, and it's just so it's so great.
So the impression I'm getting is you really like this game.
Yes, I generally I'm now 43 years old. Usually I can tell myself, hey, I'm going to go to bed at midnight, and then I'll stop what I'm playing and go to bed at midnight. But I've been up until 3 or 4 in the morning playing this game, and like, oh, no, I'll go to bed at 5. It's fine. It's fine, right? I don't need sleep. I'm going to play this game. And like, okay, everyone go play it.
Embrace the degen.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so that's what I've been playing mostly.
Okay. Well, I played some more of the making of Karateka. I'm not going to talk a lot about it because there's really not a whole lot new to add other than I just think that's a real unique package. Like to go from Atari 50, which was like this fantastic package, and then go, we're going to make a game entirely about one game. Mm-hmm. And my initial reaction was like, oh, okay, yeah, like that's a cool game, but like, how are you going to make that into a worthwhile full product other than, like here's some different versions of Karateka? And they really go out of their way to like expand that. And like by the end of it, they're doing, hey, this is the early planning for Karateka 2. And in that you see what would eventually become Prince of Persia. The I guess arguably from your perspective, the big game that Jordan Mincher did that he's most remembered for. And so I just think like it's that and, having access to the people involved, like the interviews with Jordan, they have his dad as part of those interviews, and his dad's like talking about, oh yeah, I used to have to give you all these quarters so you could go play Asteroids. And he goes, yeah, Dad. And he's, and his dad helped write the music for the game. And so it's just really a cool package. And like, I'm really excited to see where they go next with that series. Like, what is going to be the next game? I'm sure they've already planned it out. I would think they planned out the first, 3 or 4 of those before they even start it, since they've announced it as a series. But, I just keep thinking like, well, what other game is going to have this rich treasure trove of background details for it? Like this is really cool. They're doing something that nobody else is doing, and everybody should like take heed of it. The other thing that I'm playing, which Mario kind of alluded to, I started Starfield. I'm still very early in it, so I'm, much like Mario, I'm still not deep enough to give a full review of the game. I think also, like you, Mario, I'm maybe not the biggest fan of Bethesda's RPGs. I always am excited when I start one of these games. Like when I started Oblivion, when I started Skyrim, I was always like, yeah, this is going to be great. Like, I'm really excited. And then somewhere along the way, I fall off and lose interest in these games. And so I'm playing this going, I think I'm going to lose interest in this. Yeah. Yep. And it's pretty cool to start out, and, it gets you into the story. And I think part of the problem with this game, and this is going to be depending on your expectations. So let's reset expectations for people who might play this. This is just Skyrim in space. This is just Fallout 4 in space. It is a new coat of paint on those old games. There's really very little that's new about this game. There are systems that are new, like we're going to, there's shipbuilding and different things of that nature. But, like when they were originally kind of showcasing trailers for this game, whether this was fair or not, lots of people interpreted those trailers to be much closer to like a No Man's Sky, like a sort of full outer space exploration type game. And it's really not that. It is very much more, here's some maps and you can get in your ship and you can fast travel to these other maps. So I know they advertise, like, hey, these maps are, bigger than Oblivion for each planet. And you're like, yeah, but like then there's nothing there. So like you get to the planet and there's like 2 locations that are worth going to. And then you're like, what happens if I go out here and explore? And you're like, there's nothing. And, there's some planets that just literally have nothing. But like even the planets that do have something, outside of the main cities, there's just not a lot there. And there's not a whole lot of reason to getting your ship and like just go flying around in space. It's not Wing Commander. You're not flying from planet to planet or flying a lot of like space missions. So when you fast travel, you might end up in space in the middle of a dogfight and you have to fight. But it feels like almost like an afterthought to the game. And it's not badly, it works and it's decently designed, but it certainly doesn't feel like this is a space exploration game first. This is a Bethesda RPG first with some space elements tacked on to it. And that doesn't make it a bad game. But it's just like expectations have to be set in place, or I think people are going to get into this and be like, this is not the game I expected. And then I would say, like, beyond that, like, it just plays like one of those Bethesda RPGs. There's nothing that feels like, this doesn't feel like the next generation of those. Breath of the Wild feels like the next generation Zelda, right? This does not feel like the next generation of Bethesda RPGs. It feels like a slightly prettier version of those old games. And there's lots to like in the looks of the game. It has that, what they call NASA punk look to it, where everything's sort of grounded in reality, but sci-fi, futuristic. So like when you're walking through your ship, there's bolts on everything. You can see the boats, and that sounds like a very minimal thing, but it actually adds to like, believing in that world and feeling like this is a real world you're inhabiting, and the design is cohesive throughout the game. And it's kind of neat to see that, something that's different than the sort of Apple aesthetic where everything is like smooth and white, like, the Star Trek reboot was that. So there's something neat about seeing that in the game. This is not the game for me, and it's not because it's a bad game. I think the people who love those type of games will probably love this. I think it's closer to that type of game because I like the sci-fi setting more than I like dragons. So I think I'm going to keep playing it, but there are games that are coming out soon that I think are going to pull me away from this, including Baldur's Gate 3 whenever I get around to playing that. I can see myself jumping over to that and not coming back to this.
That just came out for PS5, right? Baldur's Gate?
Yes,
Is it the
I think
same
so, because it was a month after the PC release.
Yeah, and I would agree with basically everything you said. I'm sure the game is phenomenal. It's just not the type of game that I tend to connect well with. I will say it was incredibly validating to pass the persuasion check against the like pirate leader. I was like, validated, yes. I can teach persuasion.
Yeah, that's weird. Maybe that should be like the final for the game for the class.
I was gonna say. So how would we incorporate
Persuade this pirate leader to not keep trying to kill you.
Oh, Jay, that sounds right up your alley. You did your master's on gamification, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe design an entire persuasion class around, like turn it into a Bethesda RPG.
Oh, definitely. I would easily do that. I would be happy to do that.
I think that definitely needs to be the new example persuasive speech to show students.
Yeah, well, it was like you got like 3 tries. I failed on the first one. I failed on the second one, and the third one. It was like, I don't know, why shouldn't we keep fighting you, or what makes you think? And I think my character's response, or the one that I chose, was just like, I just soloed like your entire fleet of pirates. What makes you think you're going to stop me? And his response was like, that's a pretty good point. Like,
Credibility.
Ezra's like, is this an ethos, pathos, or logos?
I think those are the moments that make this game cool, right? And I think that's the stuff that's going to get people into this game, I feel like. I think what may push people away from the game is that it has less of the emergent stuff that Baldur's Gate seems to have in it. There's less of the I'm going to solve this my own way. But, and that's what I think kind of makes it feel a little old coming into it, is like, yeah, that sort of stuff where you're having to persuade somebody or threaten somebody, in a moment. That's really cool, but Bethesda's games have been doing that for years. And so it's not really new, but they do it well, right? So you can't really blame them from going back to the well again. Sure. So, it's an interesting game, and I think it's a good game, and I think people who like those games will be happy with it. I just don't think people who are looking at it going, hey, it's not Mass Effect 2. It's not their Mass Effect 2 moment, even with the more action-oriented fight system and everything. It's not that moment for this. I guess this is a new franchise, but they're all spiritual successors to each other in one way or another. All right. Well, let's move on.
Hold on. Sorry. I remembered one thing that I really wanted to talk about that I missed, that you reminded me of when you were talking. In Sea of Stars, the one thing that I don't like is that there are very limited fast travel options. And the way that it's set up is like there's an overworld where you just follow a path to go between different places. And then there's different ways to like have a boat and stuff afterwards. But in order to get to places, like you'll go somewhere and you have to go through like 3 areas that you already cleared once. And there's enemies that aren't giving you any good experience, and you still have to like run into them. Sometimes you can run past them sometimes, but sometimes you're just stuck getting them. So developers, if you're listening, make sure there's better fast travel, which I think there might be some. I'm a good amount through the game. I think there might be something better coming up soon though. And there are fast travel options too. There's, and this isn't a spoiler because it happens right at the beginning, but there's big giants that put you in a ball and throw you across the world.
It's like canon travel.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's it made me think of, is it Secret of Mana that had the cannon?
Yep.
Yeah. And that was the biggest Secret of Mana part. Yeah, but it's limited, and to get to most of those places, or to get to the place you want to go when you land there, you still have to go through a couple of levels that you already beat. And there's a few times where it's like something that passes, like bypass them a couple places, but not everywhere. Okay, there. I had to get out the one thing I didn't like about the game.
I think what's kind of interesting, we're talking about fast travel in Starfield. We're talking about like your character's constantly running in a 16-bit style JRPG, right? Like, I think what we're seeing in a lot of these games is improvements. Even if we're going back to an old style of gameplay, we're coming at them with new improvements to make these games much more playable.
Yeah.
It used to be like this weird design choice by some developers. Like, we need to make our games sort of punishing as a form of challenge. And I think a lot of developers are moving away from that idea of, making games sort of inconvenient.
Yeah. And you can make Sea of Stars more inconvenient like that because you get relics in the game and you can turn them on or off. And like one will make the game harder, one will make it easier, one will make it so you automatically like dodge some of the times. Some of it'll make it when you do your regular attacks, it'll always hit and do the second attack after that too.
It's like Super Mario Wonder.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
So.
And then, but like I think of like Final Fantasy VI, you had to buy the sprint shoes and then run, and someone had to be wearing them all the time, right, in order to do that. And you don't have to do that in the next game. So that's good. But again, fast travel, come on.
All right. Well, let's move on to the news, and we have a fair amount here. So starting off with Starfield, the Starfield director Todd Howard's most played game ever is the NCAA football series. His personal favorite game of all time is Ultima 7, though he feels that Tetris is probably the best game of all time, or the perfect video game. Mm-hmm. I mostly included this because a lot of the like sort of fanboy, console war crap that goes on via social media, which is weird that that's still going on after all these years, is often about like who are the hardcore gamers and who are the casuals. Mm-hmm. And the casuals are usually the people who are playing games like Call of Duty and, Madden football and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really interesting. Here's Todd Howard, the person behind one of the biggest releases of the year that most people would call a pretty hardcore video mm-hmm. game, saying, no, I play these casual games. Like, just like everyone else who's not insane. I just play which games I like, and like NCAA football and Ultima 7. Like, these are very different types of games, mm-hmm. and that's okay. You can play all of them. Let's see. The developer behind Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, has said there is currently no DLC plans for the game, unlike Breath of the Wild. Quote, I feel like we've done everything we can to create fun in that world, which seems to imply that the next Zelda game will be in a new Hyrule, mm-hmm. that they will not go back to reusing the map again, mm-hmm. which, seems logical, right? But like, absolutely. It's interesting to have that confirmation. Mm-hmm.
It seems logical, and also like this is kind of, if as we've been strongly led to believe that the Switch 2 is coming soon, I think about like, when I think about the Switch, Breath of the Wild is the game I think of. Mm-hmm. Like I remember at release walking through the student center at my undergrad and people playing that, and like mm-hmm. even, I think it's fitting to have Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom kind of bookend the Switch's mm-hmm. lifespan in a way, mm-hmm. and like if they were focusing on doing DLC for that, it would mm-hmm. probably end up on the Switch too. So I think it's just kind of neat and kind of mm-hmm. nice that it's like, yeah, this Zelda world is bookending the Switch's mm-hmm. lifespan.
And honestly, I'm okay with this because I feel like Tears of the Kingdom was a full, complete game and it didn't need anything else too. And I don't need another game just like this where I have to get over 1,000 Koroks to complete it, because I still feel a little upset that I haven't completed it, like with all of that, even though I did everything else except for that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like this open world design mm-hmm. will be carried over in some form or fashion. Mm-hmm. It just won't play exactly the same as mm-hmm. these last two games, because it won't be set in the same world. Yeah. It sounds like mm-hmm. they're trying to make a clean break.
Yeah, which I'm fine with.
Yeah, you want to see them innovate. Mm-hmm. Let's see, Stray, one of our top 10 games of the year last year. I think it was number 5 or 6, mm-hmm. somewhere in there.
Something like that.
Is being adapted into an animated movie by the director of Ice Age, Chris Wedge. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of interesting. I think Stray would work very well as an animated movie.
Yeah, I'm excited for this. And like after studios did the whole Ice Age team dirty, I'm excited to see them getting to do cool stuff. I'm really looking forward to this. I think that it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and this is Annapurna Interactive. Obviously, there's also the film side of Annapurna. So, they're handling this kind of all in-house and everything, which is Something we've talked about a lot. All these video game developers, we're going to talk about it more here in a few minutes. But all these video game developers trying to turn those IP into, cross media IP, not just games, but films, television shows, etc. And this is one of the better ones. I think this will work out well, hopefully. Let's see. The creative director, Elizabeth Pellin, has left Ubisoft Singapore to return to Ubisoft's Paris headquarters. This is the third creative director that they have lost at Ubisoft Singapore since 2018, and this is the Skull and Bones team. So Skull and Bones still never coming out. There's certainly, we take no glee in that, but it is like some games you just go, oh, it's just one disaster after another.
Not that I'm particularly invested in this and would cry, but you can laugh or you can cry,
Right, yeah. I think, nobody's hurt in this, so we can laugh at it. The Alone in the Dark remake has been pushed from an October release date to January 16th of next year. This seems like very sane on their part. Nobody was going to play an Alone in the Dark remake this October with Mario and Sonic and Spider-Man and everything, Alan Wake 2 and everything else that's coming out in October.
Gosh, I forgot about Alan Wake 2.
Yeah, that October is so packed, it is very easy to forget about major games. So imagine how many people would forget about Alone in the Dark. So look forward, if you were looking forward to that, I guess the only negative you can point to with that is Alone in the Dark is a very Halloween-y game. So moving out of that season seems slightly disappointing. Nintendo has released a video with Charles Martinet and Shigeru Miyamoto addressing Charles's retirement as Mario. I thought this video was very weird.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you all felt about it. Speaking of Ryan, we mentioned earlier, Ryan did chime in with their thoughts that this video also seemed a little weird, but they were hopeful that it wasn't as bad as it maybe felt.
So to me, the video felt like, I don't know if I've ever seen one, like a real one, but like on television shows when they have like the terrorists putting somebody and say, hey, we're making this video. You want to tell everybody that everything's okay. And that's what it felt like to me. Like Charles Martinet, like Shigeru was pointing a gun at him or something when he was talking, because it was weird and awkward. And granted, I've never seen him in person or speaking. All I know is his whoa and like Mario voices, but like it seemed very, very forced, and it was just weird to me.
It's the complete opposite of the forced Chris Pratt spent his childhood stomping on Goombas and Koopas. And
Or he's clearly reading off cue cards right on camera.
Yeah. That's what it felt like to me. So,
yeah, it felt like a very sort of like PR produced piece.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we're getting rid of this beloved figure as the voice of this character. We're going to catch backlash for this. So let's produce a video where he goes on and says, no, this is what I want. This is for the best. And I'm going to be the Mario ambassador, which he has said in interviews. He has no idea what that means.
Yes.
yeah,
So it just
feels weird.
It's also really weird that, and I understand from a practical standpoint why, but the two of them are clearly not in the same studio filming this.
Yeah.
Like they clearly filmed one of them in Japan and one of them in the US, which makes it feel even less or more impersonal.
Yeah.
Right? Like if they had been in the same room and you took Doug Bowser and put him in there with them as well, and hey, we're all a big happy family and everything, and things are evolving, but it's not in a bad way.
Yeah.
Like you would have bought it more, but like I think you're right that it feels like a hostage video where he's reading a prepared statement, and
it feels like when you watch like Nintendo Directs or PlayStation Presents or whatever, and they'll they'll show a clip and then they'll cut back and they'll be like, wow, isn't that great? Yeah. I'm so excited for this.
Yeah.
Or like,
And you can tell they have no idea what they just watched.
Yeah. It's like, I always think of when, so I promise this connects. In the early 2000s, MTV broadcast the Legally Blonde musical from Broadway. And you can find that on YouTube and watch it. But one of the YouTube videos has, the MTV hosts like kind of doing the commercial break cuts, and they're always just like, wow, Warner's such a jerk. What's Elle gonna do now? It's like, it's that same feeling of like, could you be any more stiff? Like, could you pretend to care?
Right. And we know that Charles Martinet is a good actor.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he's not just a good voice actor. He does live action as well. This is a talented man, and like, he does, I mean, and in fairness, he is appearing as himself, but that's what he's been doing for decades for Nintendo.
Yeah.
And that's theoretically his whole job as Mario ambassador is to appear as himself.
But he doesn't know that. Nobody knows that.
But so I don't think he's a stiff guy.
No, it definitely seems like it seems like it feels like when Mark Hamill was doing interviews before Episode 8 of Star Wars and was kind of like, ooh. Well, there were some choices.
Mario has no idea what we're talking about.
So that's where I leave this conversation.
There were some choices.
We should just do this rest of this podcast in Star Wars metaphors just to lose Mario.
Episode 8 of Star Wars made some choices with Luke Skywalker that Mark Hamill had to be very diplomatic about presenting the fact that he strongly disagreed with these choices. And like, it feels like that.
Yeah.
And there was one line in this video, or well, I guess two lines technically, that really, really seemed off to me. And then so when Shigeru was talking, he was like, I remember you used to come up and call me Papa. And then later at the end of the video, Charles was like, oh, it was really great talking to you, Papa. And I was like, that just seems awkward to me. Also because Charles looks much older than Shigeru. I don't know if he is, but he looks much, much older. So like, he's calling this younger person Papa, and it's like I get it, I guess, but like, come on.
No.
Yeah. I mean, and of course we don't know the real story behind this and everything. It feels odd, and I think Nintendo has handled it oddly, and so we probably won't talk about this again unless something comes out, and I don't see that coming out anytime soon. I think that's why he has the title of Mario Ambassador, is to like help keep him quiet about whatever happened. And I don't mean that like I think there's something bad on his end, right? Like this feels much more like Nintendo wanting to make a clean break.
Yeah, it feels like Nintendo wants to move on, and he's like, okay.
Yeah. Speaking of Nintendo and maybe a more positive light, multiple sources claim Nintendo showed off the Switch 2 in demo format at Gamescom. That was the recently big game show in Germany, behind closed doors to developers. So this was not something they were showing to people, coming up to their booth or anything. One demo is rumored to have been a Breath of the Wild version running at a higher frame rate and higher resolution. So this would be much closer to, maybe running at 1080p with 60 frames per second, or maybe even at a higher resolution and full 4K, as some rumors have been about the Switch. While another was the Unreal 5 Matrix demo that came to PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S and X. I don't know if any of you have played this or seen it. This was a demo that Epic Games developed using Unreal Engine 5 to showcase the power of it. It is quite impressive visually. So a lot of people have pointed to this and said, well, this is a very good sign for the future of the Switch. But understand, like, the whole basis of Unreal Engine is that it's scalable. So the Switch 2 might be able to run, say, this demo or Unreal Engine 5, and it almost certainly will run Unreal Engine 5 because every game coming out is being developed for that. But it doesn't mean it's going to run it at the same quality you would see on a PlayStation 5. So that is not what this is meant to say, but it is meant to say that, certainly this is running. You can run Unreal Engine 5 games, which is a positive for third-party development.
So is the consensus assumption that the Switch 2 is basically going to be the same thing as the Switch, like in terms of its gimmick of being both portable and console?
I think at this point, most people agree that the Switch 2 will be very similar in that setup, that it will be a portable that can dock to a screen in some way. Now, how that works, it might change. It's almost certainly not going to use the same dock. It's almost certainly not going to use the same like Joy-Cons or whatever it does use. And it will almost certainly, because it is Nintendo, have some new gimmick as part of it.
That's, just thinking about their last 3 consoles of the Wii, the Wii U, and the Switch. I mean, I think you can definitely see, the DNA of the Switch in the Wii U. What they were trying to do with the Wii U. I think you could arguably say they mastered with the Switch.
Absolutely.
I guess, I can understand why they would do something similar because of how successful the Switch was. But at the same time, what does that mean in terms of, are people going to be as invested in buying it if, what makes this different aside from higher frame rate, higher resolution? My worry is that it's basically going to be whatever the 3DS bonus XL edition was that had 3 games. I know it's not going to be that, but
right.
It had 3 games that required it. And is it going to be backwards compatible? Because I think that's just a conversation that will and probably always needs to be had when it comes to games. Is it going to use the same sort of Nintendo Online with the virtual consoles? And I know nobody, here has the answers to that. Part of me wonders if it wouldn't be, I know they probably don't want to go back to splitting development, but if they released more of a dedicated console and continued to simultaneously develop for the Switch and for that.
Yeah.
Where you get potentially I'm sorry, Alicia.
No,
where you get a new not a new avenue of gamers, but you've got all the people who bought their Switch, and so you're going to continue to satisfy them. But there are a lot of people who have Switches who might not necessarily be interested in a new console. And so if you stop developing, or if it's only development for whatever this new Switch is, if that's going to, like I said, I don't know, hurt sales or hurt retention of people who want to feel like they continue to have their Switch. But like I said, I don't necessarily know.
Well, and that's kind of along the lines of what I was going to say too, is how long did I wait before getting a Switch? Because money. And if the Switch 2 doesn't have a brand new gimmick, it's the same reason that we stayed on the PlayStation 2 until the PS4 was out. And yeah, it sucks not being able to get new games, but if you're not going to do anything new to encourage me to get it, does that make sense? Just kind of,
Yeah.
I look at the Switch 2 and I'm and I'm sure as we get closer to release, they'll release more information and all that. But right now, the idea of a Switch 2 just feels like, okay, you just want to get more money.
Yeah, and I think, it's maybe not fair to hold that against Nintendo, considering Xbox doesn't do anything different. PlayStation doesn't do anything different from console to console except make it more powerful. But yeah, maybe there's just more expectation of Nintendo to push, continue to push the industry.
Well, like you think about how you could connect GameCube and Game Boy Advance games for the longest time. And like it'd be neat to see some of that kind of crossover work come back where they're giving you a reason. From a marketing perspective, it would make sense to give you a reason to buy 2 consoles.
Yeah, I think, what you're touching on is like the age-old debate that children have with their parents, right? This goes back to the original NES, and when they moved to the Super NES, a lot of parents said, well, you already have a Nintendo. Like, why do you need this new one? And in that case, people don't realize like what a big deal it was at that time that NES games would not play on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Like lots of parents like balked at that. They looked and said, I've bought you 15 games over the past 6 years. Why am I going to spend $200 on a new system that can't play any of those? And so I think Nintendo, right, has these probably unfair expectations that they'll do something more than just a more powerful Switch. Even though, as you noted, like that is all that the PlayStation 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 have been, right? It's just a more powerful system. Like there's some gimmicks in the controller and stuff, but like it's really just been a more powerful PlayStation again and again.
Yeah, that's not why people aren't buying the new PlayStation for like the gimmick and the controller. Whereas
they're buying it because it's not backwards compatible and they need new games.
Yeah, I think that but that I imagine I don't know if we just talked about this last week. So many people bought Wiis because of it was accessible and it introduced games to like a brand new community of people who may not have previously considered themselves or thought of themselves as enjoying games. And I think the Switch did the same of like, oh, I don't know if I necessarily want to have this constantly hooked up to the TV, but laying in bed, playing Animal Crossing or whatever. I think that, it introduced a lot of people to the medium or welcomed people, into the medium who maybe previously had hesitations. And so I wonder how the Switch 2 or whatever their next console will attempt to do the same thing.
I think the problem that Nintendo is running into right now is that hardware is just too underpowered to do what they want to do.
Sure.
Like when you play Tears of the Kingdom, that is a beautiful game, but it is a beautiful game that at all times, like you can hear your Switch screaming in pain, trying to run.
Yeah.
Like your Switch is like, please stop. This is going to kill me. Please stop. And it is not enough to hold that game back. But like, we talk about the Pokemon games and how they have really looked rough the last couple of games, particularly when you start looking at them in the greater scope of the way games look today. And those games don't look like AAA top games, which Pokemon games should at this point.
The DS
we were
games.
just talking about Starfield and the way that it looks and like the visual fidelity of even just the bolts on the thing of like, are you going to have that level of detail? And I think that, that certainly is fair. Again, sorry, Alicia.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing. The DS games are probably peak Pokemon visual, not the Switch games.
Yeah.
And so I think the thing is, it's not even an issue of looks at this point. It's that the games they want to make, they can't make.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you start thinking, like, what does the next Mario game look like? And does it borrow from Bowser's Fury? And is it a more open world Zelda style adventure? And can the Switch run that at not even at the visual fidelity, but just run it in the way they want? And I think Nintendo at this point is looking at it going, well, no.
Yeah.
And so we need something more powerful. And I think the question is that next step is certainly going to be a more powerful system. Is it going to have some additional gimmick? Is that additional gimmick going to be what we get from, a minor gimmick, or is it going to be something major? I think Nintendo is very hesitant to repeat the mistakes of the Wii U, right? You had a blockbuster system with the Wii. You do a follow-up to it. First off, people don't realize that it's a sequel. They think it's just an add-on. You buy this tablet for the Wii. And so that confused a lot of people. And then I think also like that shift away from what the Wii was doing turned a lot of people off from that system, and they lost a lot of that fan base.
Well, and the Switch is still climbing in sales ranks. We talked last week. It's now the number 3 selling system of all time.
Yeah, and
Like,
and I think they're looking around at it and and just figuring like, look, the Steam Deck is selling exceptionally well. So it's not just us who's doing this. People are copying us. We can't stay that far behind. And I mean, as far as is it going to be the same as a handheld and something that you dock, I don't think they can move away from that because, I mean, you already kind of touched on it, that they have unified their development teams, which has been super successful for them because there's been this is the first Nintendo system since like the Super Nintendo to have a good cadence of releases. Like Nintendo systems are infamous. I mean, the home consoles are infamous for, you get 1 or 2 games a year and you're not getting a game every like 2 or 3 months. And now you do because the portable teams and the console teams are both developing for this. And so, you just think about this year alone, how many first party Nintendo releases we've gotten. And, you got Metroid Prime and you got Mario Wonder and Tears of the Kingdom and the Super Mario RPG remake. And, you have a steady release of Nintendo branded titles coming out. And I think they do not want to move away from that by splitting that team. And I also think, like, I know a lot of people who only ever play their Switch docked and a lot of people who only ever play it undocked.
yeah.
And, if you start it's not a situation where you can go, well, 90% of our people are playing this docked. So who cares about that 10%? I think that split is probably fairly even.
Yeah.
And from their perspective, we can't lose one part of that.
No, I completely agree.
Yeah, and something that you kind of alluded to, but I think would be a smart move, was if they make a regular console with more power, but it streams like seamlessly to the Switch that you have. So you have this powerful one, and then the Switch is more like the PlayStation thing, like the handheld one. The
PS3.
Yeah, and you can play the games on the Switch too, but you can also use that to stream the stuff that's on the new console. And then the next one is an updated Switch, which then you can still play from the other one in stream, right? And going back and forth like that. So it's the same team, but they're switching back and forth to make them work together. I think something like that would be great.
And when the Switch was originally announced, there were a lot of people who thought it might be essentially another Wii U in that you could interact both on your tablet and on the TV at the same time, right? So there was a processor in the dock, and it would allow, so games like Super Mario Maker, like that's the ideal way to play that game. You're editing the level on the tablet, and then you're seeing it up on the screen. And so it essentially works as a DS, right? You have 2 different screens. I think some people have speculated that the Switch 2 may actually do that, that there may actually be more processing power, or any processing power in the dock itself.
Not just a piece of plastic.
Yeah.
Right. And that, that could be a potential way to like handle that, so that would open, and that might be the gimmick, right? So there would be some games that would require that, but not most games. Yeah. Most games would still function fine, whether you're doing it handheld or on the system itself. And that extra power for some games, like say, if you port Elden Ring over to it, might allow it to play at a higher resolution when docked and everything, because you'd have that extra processor in there. Nobody knows right now, but.
And I think the other thing that we'll just have to wait and see, and you brought it up, the comparison that came to mind as a more powerful thing would be the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck is also like significantly bigger than the Switch is, like physically in terms of
it's a big
size.
boy.
Yeah. And I like it, but it also in some ways makes it feel less portable. With and so how do you find the balance between we've got this manageable physical size for whatever the undocked version is, while still maintaining, or increasing that power. And so I think it will be, you know, I don't bring this up to be like, no, this is definitely not what they're going to do, but just I'm very interested to see what they will do, considering how successful the Switch was, of like, you can't really abandon that, but at the same time, you're known for pushing the gimmicks within the industry forward. And so, you know, what are they going to do? I'm like I said, I'm interested.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime there's new hardware coming out, it's exciting. I think particularly Nintendo hardware, because they do like swing for the fences. They try crazy stuff in a way that Sony and Microsoft are more hesitant to do. And so, yeah, I mean, it's going to be an exciting year next year. Or maybe even by the end of this year, we may get our first tease of what the Switch 2 is going to be like. Let's see, a few more items here. Doug Bowser, which is the head of Nintendo of America. Yes, his name is actually Doug Bowser.
I love that so much.
Has said in an interview, so they had Nintendo Live last week, which was the big like event they had up in Seattle. And as part of that, there's some different interviews that came out. He said Nintendo is, quote, evolving into an entertainment company. And I think this is really interesting, right? So when we hear that term, they're evolving into an entertainment company, I think some people panic, but I think what he's really talking about here is, right, we know they make video games. Now they make movies with the Super Mario movie, the number 2 movie of the year at this point. They have theme parks now with a Nintendo Land opened at pretty much every Universal park around the world. And you know, they are and they make toys. Like they have those Lego Super Mario sets and everything. So, you know, this is a very different Nintendo than, say, 10 years ago.
They can go back to their roots and sell playing cards.
Yeah, that's true.
True.
So I think this is good. I mean, we've talked about, I mentioned this earlier, but like all these film companies or all these game companies are doing this. Sony is doing this, obviously, with, you know, Gran Turismo currently in theaters, and Annapurna is trying to do this with their properties like Stray. I think a lot of these companies are looking, particularly post-pandemic, as we need to balance our income and where our income is coming from, so that if something happens in one area, we continue to draw income. And I think also this gets back to video games are more expensive to make now. And you need some way to like bring in extra income so that, you know, you have a game like Stray, that's a small little indie game, becomes a big hit, and not all of Annapurna's games do that. So how do they milk Stray for as much money as possible before, you know, so it can pay for some of those other games?
Yeah, I think hearing this, like, I do still have, and we've talked about this before, but like the concern of like, okay, how much crossover do we have to pay attention to? You know, it's the same burnout problem that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has right now. So like, I do have that concern, but I don't think it's so much, I don't think it goes beyond concern at this point, because I think that there's plenty of room for them to not do that level of intense crossover work that, say, Marvel has.
Yeah, and I think we've talked, or at least I feel like you've talked about it, just in the sense of a lot of Nintendo properties tend to cross over like that, or even like games within the same property.
But we've got to have a Super Smash Bros. Movie
meaningfully linked to one another.
Yeah.
So I guess that is what makes me not worry as much. But sure, I those overly convoluted storylines with 7 different mediums.
I think we're in a place in popular culture where we expect everything from one company to cross over. So like, this is part of why there's so many conversations about disliking the state of DC movies and TV and all that, because we expect that crossover.
Cast Ezra Miller as Kirby.
Oh God, no! I can't put on record what I would do if that happened.
Kirby is a they them. I feel like.
Can we cast an actual good non-binary performer if we do that then? Like, for the love of God, not Ezra Miller. I can't put on record what I will do if that happens. But, you know, I think that.
Okay, what about like Ezra Miller as Waddle Dee?
Oh, Ezra Miller as Waluigi. That's the only one I could accept. Because
I feel like they would actually be really good as Waluigi.
Yeah, but the thing is, we all know Nintendo hates Waluigi, so Ezra Miller would get like 2 seconds of screen time, and that I could live with.
Well, now that Waluigi is getting their own voice actor, though, because in the video, Charles Martinet said that they were all getting separate voices, I think. Or it sounded like separate voices. So now if Waluigi's getting their own voice actor, there might be more Waluigi.
Nah, Waluigi just ain't gonna talk.
Here's the thing: they should.
Mamma mia, Waluigi's a mute.
No, cast Proton John as Waluigi. That's what I want. Proton John does the best Waluigi out of anyone. But I think it'll be interesting to see if there's pressure as they like move into doing more movies and doing more of these kinds of things. If there's pressure to have the crossover, you know, of like, oh, you know, we have Super Smash Bros. So like, when are we gonna see, you know, Mario and Samus in the same thing? Or if people will say, oh my God, please don't. We're so burnt out on having to keep up with so many things. It's just we're at an interesting point. I'm interested to see which way we tip on the scale there.
I can see them doing a Super Smash movie, but like I don't think it'll be quite the cinematic universe that we're thinking of. I think it's more like once they've established multiple characters in movies, they may say, hey, why don't we just throw them all into a movie? And we're Nintendo. We don't really have to explain this. Like there doesn't have to be continuity between these movies other than this character is showing up, right?
But do fans want that continuity?
Or they could just do a Kingdom Hearts.
But
They could just do Kingdom Hearts.
we don't get that continuity in the games, right? Like even Zelda, there's no continuity really between the Zelda games.
Right, but I think that we're at a place with movies and TV where we expect it. And at the same time, we're at a place where we're burnt out at it.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a right answer, honestly.
I think when it comes to movies and TV, you see that only one company has really been successful with that, and there's been a lot of failed imitators trying to do the same thing as Marvel.
But then we ask DC to do it.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm telling DC, just make a decent movie.
Like I said, I don't know which way. I don't know which way the scale will tip, but I do think it's going to be interesting to see which way the scale tips.
Yeah. I think regardless, we might see that in the movie side. We're not going to see that on the game side.
I don't think the game side will, no. But
I mean,
just
we're
as
not
they
getting
move into,
Chris Pratt as Mario in Super Mario Wonder.
Please
so
no.
That's
I hope
not a
not.
concern.
But
Please.
when you think about you say you feel like people are calling for that sort of crossover. Do you see that anywhere else besides DC? Because I feel like it makes sense with like comic book properties because they're in the same universe in the comic books. They cross paths in the comic books, whereas outside of Mario Kart and Super Smash Bros, you don't ever see those, you know, a lot of those characters cross paths. And so I guess I feel like I understand and respect the concern. I just don't know if you would see as strong of a call for at least the continuity or the crossover in a property where that hasn't been the norm.
I think, honestly, what I think will happen is they'll do all of these individually, and at some point, somebody's going to say, why aren't we doing a Super Smash Bros. Movie? And then once that Super Smash Bros. Movie happens, that's when people are going to start saying, well, hey, so like we know that Samus and Pikachu know each other, so why aren't we seeing Samus in the Pokemon games? Or like Samus having a Pokemon event? I don't think it's going to happen before that, but I don't see a world where successful Nintendo individual movies don't lead to Super Smash Bros.
I understand that, but like, I just don't. We don't see that in the games, right? Nobody is asking for Samus to show up in the new Pokemon game.
I would play through Pokemon Scarlet and Violet as Samus, but that's neither here nor there.
But
like I said,
there's
I
no
don't know.
outcry about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
But I also think movie and TV fans are. I think that people have different expectations from movie and TV than they do from video games.
that's fair. I mean,
And so people who are getting into video games from the movie and TV avenue may. And again, I don't think they're going to make a Metroid Pokemon game. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just interested to see what happens as they keep doing movies and shows, and how people will tip on that scale.
yeah, I think that's fair. I just don't see it as a concern for the games.
Yeah,
I think if
I agree,
anything, that affects the movies.
Yeah, I
and-
agree that it's not a concern I have for the games. It's more for we're evolving into an entertainment company.
Right. Well, I mean, I think Nintendo, like Sony, is when you look at Sony as a company, as a large company, not just PlayStation division is driving their profits at this point. They are a PlayStation company first and foremost. And even when you start seeing like the movies and TV shows that they're making, that's why so many of those are coming from that PlayStation arm of the company. And, that's not as true of Microsoft, because Microsoft makes Office, and Office generates like $20 billion a year. So they just don't even really, the video game division's a rounding error as far as they're concerned.
Microsoft has an iron fist on colleges everywhere.
But I think a company like Nintendo is looking around and saying, hey, we've been called the Disney of video games for years, but we're not doing any of the stuff that Disney does that makes them so much money. We're not doing the movies. We're not doing the theme parks. We do the merchandise, but we haven't done it, in that extensive way that that companies like Disney do. And they seem to be trying to do that more. And yeah, I think it's a valid concern to worry about. Like, do they lose their focus at some point, particularly if one of those other arms becomes more profitable?
Well, and even, if you're copying Disney, look how many of us are burnt out on Disney's desperate grabs to hold on to their IPs. Like I said, I don't think I go beyond concern at this point, because I think there's a lot of ways that they can move forward that won't lead into that problem at all. I'm just interested to see what happens.
Sure.
Gotta diversify your bonds. And also, if we end up with a final result of a buddy cop movie between Detective Pikachu and Bounty Hunter Samus, that's a win.
Look, yeah, I would be down for that. I still think that Super Smash Bros. Brawl has the best storyline.
Yeah, I'd play that game.
Yeah.
Give me Samus and Pikachu buddy cop film.
All I have to add to this is I want Sigourney Weaver as Samus
I'd be down
in
for
a
that.
live action movie.
I'd be down for that.
I mean, like, even just hiring her to do the voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? In an animated movie, have Samus, like, voiced by Sigourney Weaver. That's great casting.
Yeah.
And
That
she
would
could
be
handle
perfect.
it. Let's see. Real quick here. No E3 for 2024. The ESA has announced this. I think everyone already assumed, but they came out and announced this publicly. They said they are working on a complete reinvention of E3. So,
End of an era.
this will be multiple years now. We have not had an E3. Like, I don't know what that reinvention looks like. I am thinking they have no idea what that looks like. And I don't know that. I feel like at some point in a distant future, we will see another event with the name E3 stuck onto it. I don't know that that is going to look anything like the E3s of old. So I don't know how much it matters that something gets called E3.
Well, I think they're just going to need to add another E and be E4.
Yeah.
Yeah. Extra exponential something.
It's just, or E3 Extreme.
Oh, yes.
Go back to the 90s.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, that does it for news for this week. So let's get to our big question. So, you can tell where this came from. I went to the fair this weekend, and so I was thinking, which video game character should get a job at the state fair and doing what? So, in other words, which video game character would you like to see just, as you're walking through a fair and you look over and you're like, oh, look, there's Little Mac from and what is Little Mac doing? Man. What's his job at the fair?
He's running the hammer game where you hit the ball.
Mario, why don't we start with you?
So I saw this question and took it 15 steps further than I think you're asking. But to me, this needs to be a game. It's called Waluigi State Fair Tycoon. And I'm just like, you picture it like the cover art is going to be like the Metallica Master of Puppets art, but like it's like
all right,
pulling the strings, and then you just see like a shadowy Waluigi in the background, or better yet, like a shadowy Wario. You've got like a little Waluigi looking up at Wario, and you have like a rags to riches where Wario is like, or Waluigi is eventually overtaking Wario as State Fair Tycoon. I'm thinking it opens up, so Nintendo, you're also going to have to license the Master of Puppets song as well, because like it opens up with Master of Puppets as you're getting like this montage of the state fair, and not like a minute. We're getting the full 8.5 minute song here. Think like this game is going to be
you
melodramatic.
Could save money by having a cover and just let Charles Martinet do the cover.
There you go.
This is going to be melodramatic as hell. Think the Yakuza series. The fans will call this the Wa-kuza series, and so. I'm just saying, and the song would be perfect.
We get a Sad Lad cover of Master of Puppets.
I'm just saying, you get a perfect sort of ending because that song ends with James Hetfield like, right at the end of Master of Puppets. And you have Wario sort of walking off as he like drops some litter, and he's got like, wah-ha-ha, and then you've got Waluigi picking it up, glaring at him, knowing, this is going to be me. I'm going to take this state fair, and it's going to be apparently Minnesota level state fair. But then the game actually more plays out like The Jerk, where it's like a rags to riches, back to rags story, because that would have to be Waluigi's story.
Waluigi of puppets.
Waluigi as the jerk makes a lot of sense.
So to answer your question, I feel like Waluigi is doing like literally anything, just existing.
And now your transition to replacing Ryan is complete.
It's just a lot of mini games of you like Waluigi working his way up through the fair system.
Yeah, exactly.
Who needs Mario Party when you have Waluigi Party?
Waluigi Fair as a Mario Party replacement, I would completely buy into that.
That would be like a great like sort of rip-off game, shovelware style game of just Waluigi Fair, and it's janky Mario Party.
All right, OJ.
Oh, I have to go after that now.
Well, he had to go after you last week.
So I have a much shorter, simpler answer. I'm thinking of my girl Jinx, and she's going to be doing snow cones, right? So she's just like sprinkling her hand, and the ice is coming down, and she's putting the flavor on, and then handing them out.
All right, can I ask a dumb question? Who's Jinx?
From Pokemon.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the reason I ask this is because I went to a convention with a friend. Maybe it was at the beginning of this year, and we're walking through like the artist alley, and my friend goes, "Oh, that's cool. It's Jinx." And I look over and I'm like, "That's not Jinx." But apparently this person was dressed up as Jinx from like League of Legends. So I just like totally crapped on their like cosplay that they probably worked really hard on. Yeah. Me was like with me being an idiot. So now I feel like I have to double check who we're talking about.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I didn't think about that.
I like that there's some bitter cosplayer out there, like a picture of Mario hanging up.
Master of Puppets, please.
That person didn't like my cosplay.
That goes with the character Jinx from League of Legends, so I would think. Yeah.
All right, Alicia.
Okay, so I did think of... I have a real answer, but my joke answer is you need to have Navi just at every booth, like, hey, listen,
How to play the game.
how to play the game, getting you to walk up and buy things, like everywhere.
Safety information going to the rides.
Yeah, everywhere you need
The original Barker.
No, but my real answer is, so as y'all know, Minnesota State Fair is well known for the food. And so I
haven't heard that.
how have you not heard that?
I'm also not familiar.
What's Minnesota?
What the hell?
Like where the Twins play?
What kind of food? Like, is it a special type of corn dog or?
Every year there is, like, you need to understand when
What have you
COVID
brought
shut
upon
things-
us?
I'm sorry.
No, y'all need to understand. Everyone listening needs to understand. When COVID shut down the state fair, the first time it was too immediate, we couldn't figure anything out. But they literally did a drive-through state fair in order to still do all of the new food tasting. And so, like, the food at the Minnesota State Fair is a massive deal. And so because of that, I want Chef Kawasaki from the Kirby games working at the Minnesota State Fair, coming up with all kinds of new food things, making it happen. That's what I want.
That's a unique take on the cooking genre, right? Like to do a state fair one, like do weird junk food for the most part.
Oh, yeah.
What can you deep fry next? Okay, so I'm not as concerned about food because at the end of this month, the barbecue on the river in Paducah is coming, which has a lot of that like terrible, terrible, unhealthy for you food. Beyond just the barbecue. A lot of your deep fried Snickers and that sort of thing. So I chose Scorpion from Mortal Kombat. Mostly because I got this image in my head of a little kid winning something, and like Scorpion's booth is really terrible, so people win all the time. And so they say, I want the teddy bear, and he shoots the spear out through the teddy bear. Get over here! And like brings it back and hands it to the kid, but now the stuffing's falling out. And he's just miserable and unhappy working his booth, and he's not making any money because everybody keeps winning all the prizes. And so that was my thought, a very unhappy Scorpion. So not as well thought out as the epic Waluigi.
Scorpion also would be a very good barker. Just get over it.
Right. Yes, that's true. He's very much set for that.
My other original answer that I had come up with that I didn't like as much would just be like, the like guess your age, guess your weight booths would just be like, get like Psycho Mantis in there and just free money.
I see you like Castlevania. Oh, that has nothing to do with my weight. All right, that does it for this week's show. Thank you again to Alicia, Mario, and OJ for joining me. Thank you for listening. You can check out more of our content at salukigames.com, and we will be back soon with a new episode. Until then, have a very happy weekend, and we will talk to you soon.